Well, hello everyone. Rick Gurgitz here again with the Red Power Stores, and this is a continuation in our series of combine videos. Today's focus is going to be on our mid-range combines. Videos I've made in the past have been mostly focused on flagship, so it's time to get caught up again. Our base mid-range machine's been around for a long time. We're going to go over a lot of the settings and things that will help you have a successful harvest. A lot of information that we'll go through today is going to be repeated when we do our combine clinics, and this is just kind of a nice refresher. We'll post this video on our company's website, and then after the clinic you can go back and look at different segments of it. We'll kind of break it up. We'll go cover the feeder area, then we're going to do threshing concave area, and then move back to sieves, and finally at the back a little bit on residue management. So we've got a 2577 and a 7150. So as we think back on this, a lot of this information will apply for everything clear back, if you go back to 1480s all the way up to 7150, 7160. So a lot of that base technology was set up in the late 70s and still continues on to this day. So we'll go over a lot of the different settings. So we're back into our sieve section now. Up front you can see our auger bed. It's bringing the material back off underneath the rotor cage. And it is just mixed together. It's not stratified at all like the flagships. We have a short grain pan, and the finger bar grate drops it down on our sieves. Sieves on these have always been split into three segments. We have, I've got the midsection closed. We have a rear one back here that will open and close. And then the real one we have to pay attention to up front, we have a basically a pre-sieve setting. And then what it'll do, it does exactly what it's talking about. It's a slight pre-sieve. We have to pay attention to how we set that because we don't want to get too carried away. We're going to set it pretty much like a pre-sieve on a flagship combine. We want it at 3/8 opening for corn and about a 5/16 opening for beans, which equates to 10 mil and 8 mil, just like a flagship. And again, it's got a job. It's just going to take part of that grain mat and grabs some of the kernels off. We don't want to get it open too far up there, or we're going to start dumping too much mog down on the lower sieve. Just going to end up in the grain tank. So again, we got to set that one. It's difficult to get at to set. I'm going to show you a little trick that might help. And again, depending on the vintage of your combine, we've got, of course, in-cab actuator to adjust the midsection, but the front and this rear section are still hand adjust. And if you've got an older machine, you're going to have three sections of hand adjust in here. So let's talk about adjusting that front section a little bit. So to adjust this front section, and it's a chore to get at, but there's a little trick here we can do pre-season that'll help you a little bit. Piece of 3/8 threaded ready rod, and of course we're open way too far up there now. Our adjustment's here, but we're going to bang that over until we think we have a 3/8 opening, and we're a little bit wide yet. And see there, we're getting real nice. Maybe just a touch loose. There. We've got a nice 3/8 opening now for our pre-sieve. And again, you got to get crawled clear up in here in order to do that. But what will help now is if we look at this setting right now, and again this is going to vary a little bit, but we can kind of keep, there's number references on here, we can make a paint mark, whatever. We can determine where we're at for corn. And then this one again, we got to lock it down. Newer ones take a 10 mil wrench, and you definitely want to lock this down because you don't want that floating around. Tighten it up and we can kind of determine where we're at. So then when we get ready to do beans, we still need to adjust this, and we're going to want to shut this down a little for beans. Well, we may not have to crawl clear up in there, but at least we can get up in here, and if you bump it down a little bit, you can kind of eyeball that. And especially if we've referenced an opening spot or a paint mark, whatever you want to do, because you could take paint pencil and make a swipe across there, label it however you want to do. But I feel it's really important to know where you're at on that pre-sieve setting. I know I get a lot of machines and look at them, and they haven't been looked at or adjusted in years, but it does help us quite a bit in the performance of the rest of this if we have that about where we want it. And again, we want it basically a 3/8 opening for corn, about a 5/16 for beans. Then we're going to finish the rest up with our upper sieve setting. So again, figure out where you're at and set that up then. So as we start looking at the middle section of our sieve on these now, we've got the front set where we want it, the mid section. On anything with an in-cab adjustment, there is going to be a calibration procedure on these newer machines. And the calibration procedure will tell you to set it at a 1/4 inch or 6 mil. And then you basically hit the cal button on the screen. It's quick, it's easy. But what we're telling the machine is, hey, at this point on the potentiometer, this is a 6 mil opening. And from then on, we can go to the 15, 20, whatever we need. So this little tool here is something of my creation. I just came up with this summer. I'm getting some more of these made. Hopefully we'll have them very, very soon. But what I've done is this is 6 mil, 8, 10, 15, and 20. Gives us some different options for if we want to double check where our sieve settings are at. Because as I go out and help customers in the fall, probably one of the other main issues I run into is our sieves are nowhere near where we think they are. And that can create a lot of headaches too. So every successful sieve setup is going to have a good calibration. So we can slide that in here, and we can double check because these fingers do vary a little bit, place to place, bend, and whatnot. But for the most part, I'm going to call that a 1/4 inch opening. So we would be able to go up and then hit the cal button from that point, and then from then on, hopefully it'll stay where it's at. So I'm going to open this sieve up a little bit. We're going to jump it clear up to about 20, which is a lot of times where we might be for corn, get an idea what that looks like. So here we've got it open to basically, this is about a 20 mil setting, which probably isn't going to be that far off. We're doing some really good corn. So again, you can kind of get a view up there. The front's shut quite a bit more than this. We're open to a corn setting, and then this, I've never been a fan of this setup. I wish we had fingers like this all the way to back and they adjusted with this, similar to the flagships. Early on in the design of all this, they thought it'd be a good idea to have this rear section by itself, and then their thought was this other style finger was going to catch any kernels that might be ready to dance out the back. And see, this one doesn't even hardly open, although I got a piece of junk in there. I always set these a little tighter than these. So basically, if we're 20 up here, I'm going to be about 15 back here, and that's what this one is, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I always set this one a little tighter, not by much, but a little, than that rear one. And the reason I do that, I think if we get this one open too far, it becomes a trash dump. Again, I'm not a fan of this type of a finger, just kind of what we got. It's going to do some good yet, but we don't got to get too carried away. Just keep it a little bit tighter. And again, this one, which is our front pre-sieve, the rear one, typically you need 10 mil wrench to tighten these up. Some machines, like we'll look at beside us, use a wing nut yet, which are kind of a pain because they have a tendency to want to work loose, and then you can create a real mess. I've seen sometimes where that pre-sieve will open itself clear up or close itself clear down. So again, that other one we'll take a look at. I would almost recommend changing the wing nuts out for self-locking nuts. So kind of an overview on sieves, extremely important part, but a key thing to remember. The sieves are never the source of the problem. So many times guys say, well, my sieves can't keep up. Well, usually your problem is at the front of the machine yet, and we need to go up there and correct either a thresh issue or separation issue so the crop mat we're presenting to the sieves are manageable. And again, something like, 8 straight bars on dead dry bean straw, yeah, you're going to overload this. They can't keep up. There's not enough square inches. So a lot of times we had to go correct an issue in the front rather than blaming these. Pretty much standard. What I like to do on these, again, the upper sieve, depending on the crop, a lot of times we're going to say we're going to open it up to 18 to 20 to start on corn. Always set your lower sieve 2 to 3 mil tighter than the top one. We cannot clean up a crop with the lower sieve. You can clean it up a bit, but the top sieve is doing the majority of the work. And I've run into situations where customers, well, I got too much junk in the tank, I'm going to start closing my bottom sieve to clean it up. Well, what we do then is we choke the air supply off to the upper sieve, and then it can't do its job. So they have to work in unison. If we got too much junk in the tank and we're confident in the way we have the front of the machine set, we're going to close this one down a little bit, or excuse me, this down a little bit, and then we're going to close the lower one down a little bit. Together, you keep them in unison, always about 2 to 3 mil difference between the two. Then it'll work right. Some guys say, well, in corn, I just like to open that bottom sieve wide open. I don't like that either, because then it screws with our air blast. Because rather than, if you look at this, this is going to create a nice rearward air blast. If we stand those fingers straight up and down, the air hits them and it just wants to go straight up, and it's not moving rearward. Because everything we do with that lower sieve, you got to keep in mind, is affecting the airflow coming to this one. So again, we want to keep those two in unison in our settings between them. Another point while we're in here are grain sensors. A lot of times in corn they like to build up. You might get some stalk pieces and stuff in here. We'll throw that off. So periodically you want to look and make sure you don't have any buildup on these fingers. Another point, we want to look at our chopper knife setup. We're going to address that a little bit later, but just hold that thought. When we get to the residue spread part, keep those knife and the knife engagement in mind. So we're looking in the back of our 2577 machine, and almost a mirror image in a lot of ways. Still have our pre-sieve up there, grain pan, auger bed. We do have a difference up in here now, but the sieves, what we've been focused on, same scenario, except we have, rather than an actuator here for the mid section, we've got side adjust on this one that they came out with several years ago. Again, still have this to adjust our pre-sieve, this one to adjust this tail section. Now this is also what I was referring to where we've got these wing nuts that I'm not a fan of, because they can be a chore to get them to stay tight. Typically I like to replace them with a self-locking nut. Yeah, you gotta have a wrench with it or with to move them, but you got a much more secure setting with that scenario. We'll look at this side adjust a little bit once we get outside. Same thing. When we're trying to figure out where our pre-sieve is, again, the test with a 3/8 rod or 5/16, whichever you want, so you get a reference point off of this, would be an excellent item to do pre-season. One thing to point out, when we do the side adjust, very nice feature, but there's a tremendous amount of variability with the number scale on that. And if we look at this right here, it's probably why, because we have a ball joint here and an adjustment, and it could be adjusted all sorts of different directions. So a 15 out there, you're going to have to equate to what it amounts to in here, or a 10 or whatever, because machine to machine is going to vary a lot depending on how they got set up, how far this got threaded on here, make a huge difference on what you may see. So the moral of the story is, what I would suggest is get your either a 15 mil or 20 mil opening set up here, go out and see what your number scale is, make a mark out there so you know where corn and bean settings would be. But again, same scenario, a little bit older, still very functional. A lot of the things didn't change at all, a little bit on here is all. Again, pay attention to that chopper knife bed up there. We're going to talk about that when we get out and do a little section on residue management and spread. So here's our outside adjust we were talking to that we added in the machine several years ago. You can add it into actually going back quite a ways. And again, our number scale up here could really be anywhere, because again, if we look like on this one, look at the difference in the way the ball joint got threaded onto that rod. So this is just going to be a reference scale that you're going to have to equate to an opening. So again, what I would suggest is open this up, maybe do a 1/2 inch setting on that upper sieve, come out here and see where you're at, put a mark on it. And again, maybe, and that upper sieve setting is going to vary a little bit with the size of head you're running, how fast you're going, things like that. But again, equate it to something, make a mark, and then you'll be set to move on to the same thing with a lower sieve. Figure out where you need to be for the crop that you're in. So again, one other aspect of our cleaning system and its performance, again, of course, is our fan and fan drive. Historically on these machines, we typically got the fan pretty well wound up, whether it be corn or beans. Does a nice job there. And again, we've got the electric adjustment in and out, changes the sheave width, changes our fan speed. It's been that way from the beginning. But another thing to keep in mind, when we're talking clean grain elevator, fan, everything else, one thing I'm also seeing, again, now this, of course, in this machine we have the larger elevator compared to our other one, but a thing to remember is that on these, one thing I'm running into a lot, especially as we're starting to get into higher yield corn, you start getting 250 plus, we got to get these elevators in the high side. Now on the newer 150 series, now we changed this drive, but you want to be on the big driver sprocket and get that clean grain elevator humming. The only time you might switch it back is if you're doing seed beans, and then we'll get a little better grain quality if we slow that elevator down. But for the most part anymore, get the elevators in high side, because if we're running in low and we're flooding the lower area of this, just because the elevator can't take the corn away from that lower sieve trough area enough, we start blocking the air trying to go to that upper sieve. So then our problem just compounds. All because this isn't running fast enough to keep essentially the sieve bed empty. So again, if we start plugging up, slowing the flow down, building the corn up, this is slogging along trying to get the grain out of there, we start creating a wind jam in their block, and then our sieves don't work as well. And it's probably a variable problem. You're getting a little lighter yielding corn, it cleans itself out, works better, but it's kind of on again, off again. So again, on this one, they changed it on 150s and newer. This sprocket actually comes off. You have to loosen the tension up here, turn the sprocket around on these. But we want to be on, again, this is the driver, so we want the bigger sprocket. Get that on the high side. So again, here we are on our 2577, almost an identical setup other than a smaller elevator. Our fan drive, same scenario, and the way we change our elevator speed is different. Here, we're going to loosen this clamp up and we slide the sprocket over physically to do it. But again, we want to be on the big sprocket, the high side, get the elevator humming to keep the material from building up down in that auger bed. Again, you got to loosen the tension up on our tightener right here. Sometimes if you go to the big one, you may have to add a link to the chain. Depends on how much stretch is in it to begin with. But I would say, again, get this on the high side unless you're doing seed beans. That'd be a scenario where you might want it on the low end to help your grain quality a little bit. Another thing to remember is if you're mid-crop and you switch this, you probably need to do a new yield monitor cal, because it's going to change the rate that the grain's hitting the impact plate, and it's going to throw the cal off a little bit. So again, if you go to the high side, do another cal on your impact plate up there for the yield monitor. So now we got one area, we've got everything processed, we've moved it through the machine, we're through the sieves, we got it in the grain tank, the right thing. One thing left, we got the residue spread, important part. Pretty basic on these machines. Again, design we've really had from day one with the twin mechanical spreaders on the back. And again, just dropping the material off the back of the rotor cage. And then once we lowered these down from what they used to be, we catch it also off the sieve bed and drop that out. These spreaders used to be mounted a little bit higher, and then the sieve material went under them. But now we catch everything, spins it right out underneath here, catches them both, spreads it out. Again, so now we've moved on to the 150. Same theory, except we're hydraulically driven from underneath. They're on a swing out tray now, but does the same job essentially. It's just hydraulically driven rather than mechanically. Again, we can do some on speed on this one. Those systems over there on the 2577 of those are just a 2-speed. You have one for corn, one for beans. A little more variability on this one. But really what we need to remember, if we're having spread issues with these, couple things. A lot of it, when we remember earlier when we were looking at the sieves, I was pointing out the chopper knife configuration, whether it be on this one or that 2577. We can do a lot with how far we have those knives engaged with how far our spread is. So depending on the vintage of your machine, this is going to vary a lot. I mean, if you go back on a lot of these older ones, you got to crawl up underneath, pull the two spring-loaded pins, and swing the knife, stationary knife bank, in and out of your rotating group between corner and beans. The thing to remember is we don't always need these 100% engaged for beans. Early season, yes. If we got snarly green straw, yeah, we're going to have this clear in. As the season wears on, what I see a lot of times, that straw gets to be powder, and what happens when it hits the spreaders, it doesn't want to go out very far, it just hits them and kind of goes poof right behind. We can help that by disengaging the knives a little bit. Take that out a couple of notches, and maybe even more, and watch what your spread pattern does, because that will help. If we leave the straw in a little bit bigger particles, it's got a little more weight to it, it'll throw a little bit further. So a lot of times anymore, I highly recommend start backing these knives out as the season wears on in beans, and you'll get a little nicer spread pattern. Because again, we don't have a ton of speed choices on a lot of those older machines. You either got high for beans and that's it. And depends on, of course, your head width and things like that, how far in the wind, how far you're trying to spread. But this is one thing you can help yourself with a little bit as far as spread width, is the size of the particle in that drier straw. Okay. Just a quick view on this vintage machine. Same scenario where you can move this up and down and how far you've got the knives engaged, disengaged. But again, some of your older machines, you got to get clear inside, move it that way. But again, one thing to remember for helping our residue pattern. One last little trick on this vintage of machines with these curtains on the side. I've always felt that these curtains went rearward too far, and as we're throwing material out, a lot of times it's almost blocking how far it can get away from the machine. So what I would suggest, a lot of times I like opening this curtain back up again a little bit. I've even went to the point of take these bolts out, fold it rearward, and re-bolt it back in, and open this area out and allow our spread to go out a little further this way. It'll help a lot as far as how far that material gets out of the machine, especially if we're trying to reach out maybe to a 40-foot width draper, something of that nature. It just always, and it wears this area really hard, but even if you can open it up this much, I think it throws a lot better width-wise. The 150 series machine, we've got away from that because it's a whole different system. But anything with these plastic curtains back here, I know a lot of them, especially even starting with the 5088s and this one in that 77 vintage, all had this sealed up a lot more, I felt, than they needed to be. I mean, even a taper here would help a little bit. Whatever you want to do will help spread that straw a little further. This pretty well concludes what I wanted to go over on mid-range combine, just for some general setting things and that. Again, this is just a reference thing. It'll be a video posted on our redpowerteam.com website. I'll go over a lot of these same points in our in-house combine clinics we have coming up. But I want to have this stuff posted. That way, if we go, as you go through the clinic, if there's some point you want to go over again, you can just go back and reference it on one of the videos. You can even pull it up on your phone when you're out in the field if you want to look at something again. So again, thanks much for watching.